Hello ladies and gentlemen and movie lovers of all kind, and welcome back to the channel. As always, I am your host Brett Murphy, and for today's video it is going to be another Cinema Showdown versus video. And it is going to be the Hunger Games franchise versus the Maze Runner Trilogy. So yes, I am taking what I believe to be my first deep dive into the young adult movie adaptation genre, because there were so many of these damn things made in the early to mid 2010s that they really could be considered their own thing. And I figured what better two young adult novel movie adaptations to dive into than the two biggest, aside from Twilight, which I will likely never talk about, The Hunger Games, and The Maze Runner. So as always with these Cinema Showdown versus videos, I will be comparing these two things, in this case a movie franchise with 4 movies and a movie trilogy, across 5 rounds to determine just one winner. I would also like to issue a major spoiler warning right here, right now. I really don't think it's all that necessary with franchises that have been out for quite some time, but just in case you haven't seen these movies and maybe you're considering it, or maybe this video might tempt you to get into them, I do want to issue a major spoiler warning right now, so you have been warned. Before I hop into the actual showdown itself, I just wanted to let you all know that I have an entire playlist dedicated to all of my Cinema Showdown versus videos, so be sure to check that out, and I guarantee you'll find something you like. And so without further ado, let's hop right into things. Round 1. Main characters. In this round, I will be talking about the main and supporting characters, pretty much everyone that's not considered a villain. For the Maze Runner, we have Thomas, played by Dylan O'Brien, Teresa, Newt, and Minho. You could also technically include Gally, even though he became kind of a villain in the first movie, but then he was a good guy again in the last one. You also have Chuck, Albie, Frypan, Winston, Brenda, and Jorge. So depending on what your definition is of a supporting character, a main character, or a hero, you might include all of those extras or you might not. For the purposes of today's video, I will be including them. For the Hunger Games, of course, you have the career-making role for Jennifer Lawrence as Katniss Everdeen. Then you also have Peeta, Haymitch, Gale, Effie, and Finnick. Once again, these other characters I'm about to mention, you may not consider them to be main or major supporting characters, but once again, for the purposes of this video, I am going to include them. Those being Plutarch, Joanna, Beetee, Cressida, Pollux, Cinna, and there are a few others in there that kind of pop in and out throughout the 4 movies. The thing with this round is that The Hunger Games has by far the more memorable characters because it was the more popular series. And their names are actually quite unique, not to mention they also had people that became major stars or were already major stars. Especially by today's standards, some real heavy hitters like Jennifer Lawrence, Josh Hutcherson, Liam Hemsworth, Woody Harrelson, Elizabeth Banks, Philip Seymour Hoffman, the list really does continue to go on. But personally, I really do feel, despite these characters being more popular, I feel that they kind of botched the majority of their character arcs. Katniss just kind of becomes whiny and borderline unlikable in the final 2 films. Like almost all of her personality just got sucked right out of her. Peeta becomes a lifeless puppet. Gale, well, I just don't think that Liam Hemsworth was necessarily the right fit for this role because he just kind of doesn't have any personality in the role. And then in the end, he still doesn't get the girl, and everything that he's done has been for absolutely nothing. The Maze Runner, on the other hand, gave us characters that bonded and truly became like a family. They stuck with one another through thick and thin, and most of them were either given a satisfying or tragic end. To the surprise of many, I'm actually going to be giving this first round to The Maze Runner. Round 2. Villains. For the Maze Runner, it's a pretty short list. Ava Page, aka the Wicked Leader, and Jansen, aka Peter Baelish, aka Littlefinger from Game of Thrones, or if you haven't watched Game of Thrones, then you might also know him as the guy from the beginning of The Dark Knight Rises. The Hunger Games certainly has a lot more on offer, but once again, as always with this channel, it is definitely quality over quantity, so let's see how this plays out. The Hunger Games has the icon Donald Sutherland as President Snow, Seneca Crane, played by Wes Bentley, technically President Alma Coin, played by Julianne Moore, because by the end of it, she clearly had ulterior motives that were far more sinister and, manipulative than she let on. Commander Thread, the guy from Catching Fire who whips Gale, Cato, Clove, Marvel, and many of the other villainous tributes. Once again, on paper, The Hunger Games has much more on offer. And in terms of quality, they also have much more on offer. The great Donald Sutherland as President Snow not only trumps anybody and everybody in the Maze Runner trilogy, but also all of the other villains in the Hunger Games movies. His calm, collected, but undeniably cold and heartless demeanor, his iconic lines, and his persistence and ruthlessness. All of these things make him an iconic foe, and Sutherland does it all so effortlessly. The rest of them are just the cherries on top. Round 2 is going to go to The Hunger Games. Round 3, plot and storytelling. The plot for the first Maze Runner movie is pretty simple. We follow Thomas, played by Dylan O'Brien, who finds himself suffering from amnesia and inside of a giant maze surrounded by strangers. The rest of the trilogy follows a pretty consistent crew who are trying to unravel this whole mystery of who put them there and why. The first Maze Runner is easily the best in my mind. It remained mysterious, intriguing, and bewildering the whole way through. Though I feel the sequel still did maintain some of that mystery and intrigue, they were definitely a step back. However, I can say this, the series stayed consistent. Consistent in terms of its tone, consistent with its characters, consistent with its action and thrills, and its overall mystery, and in the end, played out in a mostly satisfying way. The first Hunger Games movie really caught fire and took the world by storm. Both the novel and the movie. Set in a dystopian future where the annual Hunger Games sees each of the 12 districts providing a randomly selected young boy and young girl to be sent away to the capital, assessed and then entered into the arena to kill one another off until only one remains. When young Primrose Everdeen is selected in her first year of eligibility, her older sister Katniss steps up and volunteers to go in her place. The remainder of the series follows Katniss and her companions and their efforts to take down the Capitol. For me, this series really fell off after catching fire. Mockingjay Part 1 was a major boring letdown, and its sequel and the series finale was okay at best. Satisfying enough to not have been a total disaster, but definitely not the epic conclusion that we were promised. Though The Maze Runner may not have been the most epic, memorable, or creative series on the entire planet, it definitely did what it set out to do from the very beginning. Remain consistent, and I feel for the most part delivered on its finale. In my own humble opinion, the same cannot be said for The Hunger Games. I personally love the first two movies, but I feel its two-part finale was like alright at best, and that's me being very generous in my opinion. But in the end, they did really put a big damper on an otherwise extremely promising series of movies. I'm going to be giving this round to The Maze Runner. Round 4. Direction and memorability. Wes Ball directed all three of the Maze Runner movies really well and definitely proved himself as a first-time director, because they definitely have their own sense of style. Each movie manages to feel different yet familiar, with more than enough memorable moments, like exploring the maze for the very first time, solving all of its puzzles, mysteries, and inner workings, some exhilarating chase sequences in the Scorch Trials, and the final act of the final film manages to feel pretty grand, and then you also throw in Newt and Teresa's deaths within the death cure, which really kept us guessing throughout the entire series. Gary Ross set the stage for us with the first Hunger Games movie, while Francis Lawrence exploded onto the scene with Catching Fire and the two-part Mockingjay finale. Even though the storytelling fizzled out in the final two installments, in my own opinion, Lawrence's direction certainly stayed strong and consistent. The Hunger Games franchise effortlessly delivered memorable characters, sequences, and lines. Even in its worst entry being The Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 1, in my mind at least, it still gave us things like the iconic bomb shelter sequence, and lines like "If we burn, you burn with us," and "It's the things we love most that destroy us." Like I just said, even in The Hunger Games' weakest entry, it still manages to give us many memorable lines, moments, and characters. Don't get me wrong, the Maze Runner Trilogy did a lot of things right, and remained super enjoyable the whole way through. true. Wes Ball showed what he was really capable of and has now since been signed on to direct some pretty big movies after making his debut with this trilogy. While Francis Lawrence and Gary Ross both offered us up a wonderful, stunning, and ultimately somber and terrifying dystopian future. In my opinion, the direction is neck and neck. But when it comes to memorability, it's no contest. Really, there's just no question at all. This round is going to be going to The Hunger Games. Final round, Legacy. The Maze Runner Trilogy adapted the stories that they were based on quite well, and stayed more consistently entertaining and intriguing than its Hunger Games competition. Its reviews were fine, nothing special, but they certainly weren't bad either. The trilogy didn't necessarily make any sort of big dent in the box office either, as each subsequent sequel made less than the previous one. It didn't catapult any careers into the stratosphere and didn't really become a global phenomenon like some of its other young adult adaptation competition. It had all of the right ingredients and did all of the right things, but audiences just didn't seem to gravitate towards it quite as much. The Hunger Games, however, definitely had the more iconic and memorable moments, lines, and characters. Made a killing at the box office, and the first two installments in particular were very well reviewed. Back when these movies were releasing, it felt like a big global event, and this series is still very beloved today, with a prequel novel already out and a movie adaptation for that prequel novel just recently announced. In the end, while I do personally feel that the Maze Runner trilogy remained more consistent with its character arcs and storytelling, I feel that this series has sadly already faded into obscurity and been forgotten by many. The Hunger Games, however, just saw its first film celebrate its 10th anniversary, which saw all sorts of special new treatments like a new steelbook box set, a few other special editions, there was posts about it and little videos and things like that, a new spin-off slash prequel movie announced, has so many memorable and iconic parts to it, and absolutely launched its star Jennifer Lawrence's career into the stratosphere and beyond. And honestly, so much more than I've been able to cover here. Therefore, I'm going to be giving this fifth and final round and the crown to The Hunger Games. So that is all for today's video, folks. Be sure to let me know down in the comments if you agree or disagree with my winner. While you're at it, feel free to let me know who you would have chosen to win each round, and don't forget to suggest what Cinema Showdown you'd like to see me cover next. If you enjoyed that video, be sure to hit that thumbs up button, and if you'd like to see more content, consider subscribing to my channel and ringing that little bell icon, that way you can be notified about all of my latest uploads. And as always, stay safe, thank you so much for watching, and that's a wrap. Hey you, yeah you, if you made it this far, just know I appreciate you, and while you're here, consider hitting that subscribe button.